As a medic, I was trained to save lives. Now I must decide who lives, who becomes a servitor, and who receives the Emperor's mercy. But when my superiors began taking patients to the upper floors, I noticed something. No one ever came back down. What happens when your name appears on the transfer list and you discover that in the grim darkness of the far future, treatment and torture have become the same thing? The air carries the scent of failure even before the screams begin. I remember the day I received my assignment to Vexus of 4. The deployment orders arrived bearing the seal of the department medicing my service at Field Hospital Tertius in the Southern Continent War Zone. I felt pride then. The parchment trembled in my hand, a sacred duty bestowed upon me by the God Emperor himself. Now that same parchment serves as a bitter reminder of my naivety, folded and hidden beneath the thin mattress of my quarters. The Medicaid transport landed during an artillery barrage. Red emergency lumens painted everything in shades of blood as I disembarked with 19 other physicians. Only 7 still draw breath. The others were claimed by disease, exhaustion, or the occasional mortar that found its way through our supposedly reinforced ceiling. The Emperor protects, but his protection feels increasingly selective as this campaign grinds onward. Medicaid Vale. The voice of Sister Hospital cuts through my reverie. 3 more transports inbound. Prepare surge protocols. I acknowledge her with a nod, already reaching for my surgical apron. The fabric is stiff with layers of dried blood that never fully wash away. Resources are too precious to waste on proper cleaning. Water rationings were cut again last week. The smell has become part of me now. The surgical theater was once a governmental building's atrium before the war. Marble columns support a domed ceiling where faded murals depict the Emperor's conquest of the stars. Now those same stars look down upon row after row of wounded guardsmen laid out on stretchers, some moaning, others ominously silent. Servitors move between them, administering basic care with the mindless efficiency of the partly dead. I check their programming each morning, but they follow their instructions with the predictable devotion of machines who know nothing else. Triage categories unchanged. Sister Deborah reminds me, though I know them by heart. Priority Alpha for officers and specialists. Beta for those who can return to combat within 3 cycles. Gamma for standard infantry with extensive reconstruction requirements. Omega for the terminal and extensive brain trauma cases. She does not mention category Epsilon, those marked for servitor conversion. The ones whose bodies remain functional but whose minds are deemed compromised beyond repair. It happens more often than anyone admits. The coitator banks need fresh processing units. The hospital needs more mindless hands. The Mechanicus priests visit weekly, selecting from our Epsilon-marked patients with the calculating precision of shoppers choosing fruit at market. I feel their eyes on me sometimes, watching, assessing my worth as I work. The doors to the receiving bay slam open. The first casualties arrive, carried by servitors whose tunics already glisten wet with blood not their own. Shrapnel wounds, chem burns. A guardsman missing both legs screams for his mother on some distant world he will never see again. I move to the first gurney, scanning the wounds with practice detachment. Medicaid Vale. A voice whispers near my ear. I turn to see Orderly Vashin. A communicate from the upper floors. Your presence is requested after this surge. The upper floors. I try to hide the tremor in my hands as I nod acknowledgement. Nobody speaks of the upper floors. The lifts require special authorization to access, and those who go up rarely return to our blood-soaked domain. Sometimes I hear noises from above, machinery humming, occasional screams that sound different from the ones I hear every day. Who sent for me? I ask, my voice impressively level despite the cold fear spreading through my chest. Margos Biologus Hicarian, Dade whispers, the name itself carrying a weight of dread. He was quite specific. After the surge, you are to report to level 8. I have never been higher than level 3. Did he say why? Theed shakes his head, already backing away as if afraid my fate might be contagious. Only that your research on neural regeneration was found. Interesting. The research, my forbidden study of alternative nerve stapling techniques that I thought no one had discovered. I had been careful using only the brain tissue of those already marked Omega, patients beyond salvation. I told myself I was being merciful, finding purpose in their final moments. But someone had noticed. Someone had been watching. A new patient is rolled before me, jerking me back to the present. Young, too young. His flak armor has been nearly vaporized, fragments embedded in his chest. His dog tags identify him as Trooper Danik Vel, Warhammer 40K Tales. Barely 20 standard years. His eyes lock with mine. conscious despite injuries that should have killed him already. "Am I going to live, sir?" he asks, blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. I make my first categorization decision of the day, reaching for the data slate hanging at my belt. Alpha, beta, gamma, omega, or epsilon. Life, delayed death, repurposing, or oblivion. My fingers hover over the screen as I think of my imminent summons upstairs. What happens on level 8? Why would Imagos Biologies take interest in my unsanctioned experiments? Perhaps I should ask Trooper what he would prefer. Would he rather die clean on this table or risk becoming something else entirely? But I already know the answer. In the Imperium of man, preference is irrelevant. We serve until we cannot. Then we serve in other ways. I tap the category on my data slate and nod to the waiting servitors. They wheel Trooper away, his eyes still fixed on mine until he disappears through the surgical bay doors. I have condemned or saved him. Sometimes the difference is academic. 3 more transports, hundreds more decisions, then the upper floors await. The Emperor protects, we are told. But as I look around at the blood-slick aisles of Field Hospital Turte, I cannot help but wonder who protects us from the Emperor's servants. The casualties arrive in waves like a crimson tide washing against the shores of our inadequate medical facilities. Each transport brings 50, sometimes 60 broken bodies, men and women who left their worlds to serve in the Imperial Guard. Now reduced to screaming meat on gurneys, we process them with assembly line efficiency. Sister Deborah moves among the wounded, administering the Emperor's mercy via hypodermic. For some, that means pain suppressants. For others, especially those I mark with an Omega designation, it means a swift chemical release from their suffering. She never questions my categorizations. The system demands compliance, not compassion. Medicae Vale, she calls, gesturing to a gurney where a woman in a colonel's uniform lies unconscious. Priority Alpha. I move to the officer, noting the cauterized stump where her right arm should be. Lust weapon, high intensity. The wound is clean, at least minimizing infection risk. She will live, though her combat days are finished. Perhaps a bionic replacement if her rank warrants the expense. I mark her for immediate surgical intervention and move to the next patient. Hours blur together in a haze of blood and screams. My surgical apron grows heavier as it soaks up more bodily fluids. Servitors mop the floor periodically, but they cannot keep pace with the constant dripping from our tables. The marble beneath our feet has developed permanent rust-cold stains that no amount of cleaning will ever remove. A junior medic approaches, his uniform still relatively clean. He must have arrived on a transport within the last week. "Sir," he begins, his voice wavering, "I have a patient with extensive cranial trauma. The triage protocols indicate Omega designation, but his vital signs are stable." I follow him to a gurney where a guardsman lies perfectly still. The top of his skull has been sheared away by something sharp, exposing the pulsating brain beneath. Yet his chest rises and falls with mechanistic regularity, a breath every 4 seconds, perfectly timed. "Look at his eyes," I instruct the junior medic. The guardsman's eyes are open, unblinking, fixed on the ceiling. No pupillary response when I pass my hand over them. No reaction to pain stimulus when I press my thumb against his sternum. The brainstem functions, I explain, but higher cognition is gone. This is textbook Epsilon category. The junior medic blanches servitor conversion. But he was a sergeant. His men brought him in personally. His rank is irrelevant now. His body is intact. His autonomous function stable. The Mechanicus will find use for him. I tap the designation into my data slate, then add, "If it troubles you, remember that he continues to serve the Emperor. Few deaths are so purposeful." The young medic nods stiffly and moves away. I wonder how long before he either accepts the system or breaks under its weight. The ones who break are usually sent upstairs. We never discuss what happens to them after. As the last of the casualties are processed, I become increasingly aware of my pending summons. Level 8. The domain of Magos Biologies Hikarion. I have heard whispers about him from the other medic. He arrived 6 months ago with a contingent of Qatari guards and strange equipment that had to be installed during a full quarantine of the upper floors. The official explanation was advanced research facilities to improve recovery rates, yet our recovery rates remained unchanged, and the number of patients disappearing into the upper levels increased tenfold. The surge is complete, medic. Sister Deborah informs me, her voice betraying unusual tension. Orderly Thade asked me to remind you about your appointment. Even she seems unsettled by my summons. Sister Deborah, who can euthanize a dozen men without changing expression. Thank you, sister. I remove my gorenged apron and gloves, depositing them in the reclamation bin. If I do not return, please ensure my research data is transmitted to Medicare headquarters on Androsia Prime. She meets my eyes, and for once I see something like human concern in her otherwise impassive face. The Emperor protects Medic. The Emperor demands service. I correct her gently. Protection is rarely guaranteed. I make my way through the hospital's central corridor, past rooms overflowing with the wounded and dying. The air grows noticeably cleaner as I approach the restricted lifts at the building's core. Tuari guards flank the entrance, their augmentic eyes tracking my approach with predatory focus. Medicae Karen Vale, I announce myself. Summoned by Magos Biologus Hicarian. Level 8. One guard steps forward, scanning my identification chip with a device built into his arm. After a moment, he nods and steps aside. The lift doors slide open with a pneumatic hiss that sounds strangely like a final breath. I step inside. There are no buttons, no control panel. The lift knows where I am going. As the doors close, cutting off my view of the familiar horror of my daily existence, I wonder which is worse, the devil I know or the one waiting above. The lift ascends, and with it my dread. What happens on level 8? Why has my research drawn attention? And most troubling of all, why do I feel as though this journey upward is actually taking me deeper into the heart of something unspeakable? The doors will open soon. Whatever waits beyond them, I remind myself that I am Medicate Karen Vale. I have made thousands of life and death decisions. I have categorized men and women like livestock, determining their fate with the tap of a finger. Now someone else will categorize me. The lift slows, stops, the doors open. The difference is immediate and shocking. Gone are the blood-soaked corridors and the moans of the dying. Level 8 gleams with polished metal and scrubbed plast. The air carries the sharp scent of industrial disinfectant, rather than the familiar miasma of infection and decay. The lighting is bright white rather than the dim, power-conserving illumination of the lower floors. A servitor awaits me, more advanced than those that shuffle through my surgical theater. This one stands erect, its human components almost entirely concealed beneath crimson mechanicus plating. Only the eyes remain visible, disturbingly alert for a being that should possess no will of its own. Medicae Karen veil it in tones, voice modulated to an approximation of human speech. Follow. I obey, noting the absence of other personnel as we move through immaculate corridors. No patients in these halls, no medic rushing between surgeries. The silence is oppressive after months of constant screaming and shouted orders. Where are the patients? I ask, unable to contain my curiosity despite my apprehension. The subjects are contained in appropriate facilities, the servitor responds without slowing or turning. Subjects, not patients. The distinction sends a chill through me. We pass several sealed doors marked with Mechanica sigils I cannot decipher. Through one partially open doorway, I glimpse banks of monitoring equipment surrounding what appears to be a back-to-tank. The shape floating within is vaguely humanoid, but distorted in ways that defy easy explanation. I avert my eyes and quicken my pace. The servitor stops before a set of ornate doors inscribed with the symbol of the Margos Biology's Guild. Enter. It commands, then turns and walks away, leaving me alone before the threshold. I hesitate only a moment before pressing my palm against the recognition plate. The doors slide open, revealing a chamber that more closely resembles a laboratory than any medical facility I have ever seen. Magos Biologus Hicarian stands with his back to me, bent over a workbench where something organic pulses beneath his ministrations. He is more machine than man, his form enlarged and distorted by numerous augmentations. Mechadendrites extend from his back like the legs of some mechanical spider, each tipped with various surgical implements. Medicae Vale, he acknowledges without turning. His voice emerges from a voxcaster rather than a human throat. Your arrival is timely. I have just completed the preliminary examination of your latest referral. My latest referral? I echo, confused. The Cadian trooper Danik Vel. One of his mechandrites gestures toward an adjoining chamber where through a glass partition I can see the young man I categorized earlier. He lies conscious on an examination table, restraints binding his limbs, eyes wide with terror. An excellent specimen. Your notation suggested potential for the Epsilon protocol, yet you assigned him to Alpha category. Curious, my blood runs cold. I had indeed marked Trooper Vale for priority treatment, not servitor conversion. That the Magos knows this has somehow overridden my designation speaks to a level of oversight I had not imagined. His injuries were severe but treatable. I say carefully. He displayed full cognitive function and could eventually return to combat duty. Perhaps Hicarian finally turns, revealing a face that is little more than a metal mask with glowing red optics where eyes should be. Or perhaps you recognize something in him that resonated with your unauthorized research. There it is, the true reason for my summons. My research aimed to improve neural regeneration techniques, I explain, struggling to keep my voice steady to save those who might otherwise be lost. Indeed, Hicarian moves toward me with the whirring precision of well-maintained machinery. Your methods are unorthodox but demonstrably effective. The question is not one of efficacy, Medic Veal, but of authority. Who granted you permission to improve upon established protocols? The question hangs between us, rhetorical and damning. Innovation without sanction is tech heresy in the eyes of the Mechanicus. No one, I admit. I acted on my own initiative based on patterns I observed in neural response to trauma. And yet, Hicarian continues, circling me slowly. Your success rate in preserving cognitive function exceeds standard outcomes by 37%. This suggests either remarkable skill or dangerous deviation from approved techniques. I remain silent, uncertain whether I am being condemned or evaluated. Show me, he commands suddenly. Demonstrate your methodology on Trooper. His injuries include significant neural trauma that standard protocols would deem irreparable. A test then, but what kind? Am I meant to prove my techniques work? Or am I being given enough rope to hang myself with charges of tech heresy? I require specific equipment, I say, playing for time. Neural mapping arrays, regenerative proteins synthesized from the patient's own tissue, all available. Hicarian interrupts, gesturing toward the laboratory's extensive array of equipment, far superior to the improvised tools you have been using in your unauthorized experiments. He knows everything. My late-night work in the disused storage closet I converted to a private laboratory, the samples I collected from terminal patients, the modifications I made to standard medical servitors to assist me. I am left with only one option: demonstrate my techniques and hope they deem me more valuable alive than dead. Very well, I agree, stepping toward the workbench. I will require an assistant familiar with the equipment. I will observe and assist as necessary, Hicarian states. Begin. And so I do, acutely aware that I am fighting for my own life as much as Trooper Veal's. I move to the adjoining chamber where the young Caden lies restrained. His eyes widen with recognition as I enter. Medicae, he gasps. What is happening? They said I was selected for special treatment, but this isn't right. Be calm, Trooper. I instruct him, checking the monitoring equipment surrounding his bed. You sustained serious neural trauma. I'm going to attempt an experimental procedure to repair the damage. But I feel fine, he protests, straining against his restraints. I can think clearly. I remember everything. I examine the medical readouts, then look more closely at the Trooper himself. His pupils react normally. His responses are coherent. But according to the data, he has severe lesions throughout his frontal and parietal lobes that should render higher cognitive functions impossible. Someone has falsified either the medical data or the patient's condition, possibly both. I glance toward the observation window where Margos Hicarian watches impassively. This is more than a test of my medical techniques. It's a test of my loyalty, my ethics, my willingness to participate in whatever happens on level 8. The readouts indicate severe neural trauma. I say loudly enough for the observation microphones to pick up. Then I lean closer to Trooper, lowering my voice to a whisper. Trust nothing. Reveal nothing. Your life depends on it. His eyes widen slightly, but he gives an almost imperceptible nod. I straighten up and begin the procedure, carefully navigating between genuine demonstration of my techniques and protecting the clearly uninjured Trooper from unnecessary intervention. I apply neural stimulators to specific points on his skull, calibrated to give readings consistent with treatment without actually delivering the full intensity that a truly injured patient would receive. Your approach is unconventional, Hicarian comments through the Vox system. You target the reticular activating system rather than the damaged tissue directly. The RAS is the gateway to consciousness, I explain, falling into the familiar rhythm of medical instruction. By stimulating it in specific patterns, we can encourage the brain to route neural pathways around damaged areas. The brain effectively teaches itself to bypass the trauma. Fascinating, the Magos responds, and I detect something like genuine interest in his artificial voice. Continue for nearly an hour. I perform a careful ballet of genuine demonstration and protective deception. Throughout it all, Trooper maintains remarkable composure, responding to stimuli exactly as a patient recovering from neural trauma should, neither too quickly nor too slowly. Finally, I step back from the table. The initial phase is complete. Neuroplasticity has been stimulated. Now we must allow the brain time to establish new pathways. I recommend a recovery period of 6 hours before the next phase of treatment. Hikarion is silent for a long moment, his artificial eyes studying the readouts. Your techniques show promise, he finally states. They align with certain research directives from Mars that have recently been implemented here. The statement sends a wave of relief through me, followed immediately by suspicion. If my unauthorized research accidentally parallels official Mechanicus directives, why the secrecy? Why the elaborate test? I am pleased to hear that. I respond cautiously. I seek only to better serve the Emperor and save those who might otherwise be lost. Indeed, Hikarion's tone is unreadable, and that medic veil is precisely why you have been reassigned. Reassignment. The word hangs in the air like a death sentence. Effective immediately, you are transferred to Level 8 research staff. Your work on the lower levels is concluded. One of his Mietendrites extends offering a data slate, your new authorization codes and quarters assignment. Your personal effects will be moved while you familiarize yourself with our protocols. I accept the slate numbly, trying to process this unexpected development, not execution or punishment, but promotion. It seems too fortuitous to be trusted, and my current patients, I ask, will be reassigned to other medic. Your skills are better utilized here. Hikarion turns away, clearly considering the matter settled. Report to Laboratory Delta after you have reviewed the orientation materials. We have 27 subjects awaiting your assessment. And Trooper? I glance at the young Cadian, still restrained on the examination table, a test subject only. His actual injuries make him unsuitable for combat return. He will be processed according to standard protocols. The cold pronouncement confirms my suspicions. Fel was never meant to be treated, only to serve as a gauge of my techniques and ethics, and I have just demonstrated both to a being who views human life as merely another resource to be utilized efficiently. I understand. I say, though, I understand nothing except that I have traded one moral quagmire for another potentially more horrifying one. Excellent. Hikarion's Voxcaster emits a sound approximating satisfaction. Welcome to Project Lazarus Medic Veil. Here we do not merely treat the wounded. We redefine the boundaries between life, death, and service to the Emperor. As I look at Troople's desperate eyes, I realize I have not escaped the system of categorization. I have merely moved higher within it, where the decisions may prove even more terrible, and the consequences far more profound. The Emperor protects, they say, but as I am learning, sometimes his protection takes forms more horrifying than the dangers it shields us from. Laboratory Delta exists in a state of clinical nightmare. I stand at the threshold. Authorization codes accepted. Identity confirmed. Damned by my own success. The chamber stretches before me, twice the size of our largest surgical ward below, yet containing only a fraction of the patients. Subjects, I correct myself. That is what they are called here. 27 examination tables arranged in 3 neat rows. Each bears a body in various states between life and death. Some still recognizably human, others transformed by surgery and augmentation into something the common citizenry of the Imperium would struggle to recognize as kin. Medicae Veil, a female Tekept approaches. Her face a smooth metal oval with a single optical lens where eyes should be. I am in Graththel, assigned as your orientation guide. Magos Hikarion has prioritized subjects 11 through 15 for your immediate attention. I follow her to the indicated tables, struggling to maintain professional composure. The subjects here bear injuries far beyond what I typically see below. A woman whose entire skeletal structure appears to have been replaced with a metal framework. Her skin stretched tight over the implants. A man with his skull opened and a strange device nestled where portions of his brain should be. Another whose limbs have been removed entirely. Torso suspended in a nutrient bath, while mechanical appendages sprout from precisely cut ports in his flesh. These are the Lazarus protocols. I ask, voice carefully neutral. Phase 3 implementations, Thiel confirms. Subjects who have progressed beyond basic neural reconstruction to enhancement stage. Enhancement for what purpose? Thiel's optical lens focuses on me with mechanical precision. War. Medicae Veil. Always war. The Imperium requires soldiers who can withstand the horrors of modern combat. Conventional medic science merely repairs. Project Lazarus transforms. I approached the nearest subject, a man whose face is partially obscured by breathing apparatus. According to the data display, he was a tank commander whose vehicle suffered a catastrophic breach. Burns covered 80% of his body and shrapnel severed his spine. By all conventional wisdom, he should have received the Emperor's mercy via euthanasia protocols. Yet here he lies, breathing steadily, neural activity registering on the monitors. His burned skin has been replaced with a synthetic polymer that mimics flesh, but provides superior protection against heat and impact. Where his spine was severed, a mechanical bridge now connects the segments, theoretically allowing for restored motor function. He will walk again, I ask, studying the readouts. He will do more than walk, Theo replies. Subject 14 will return to combat with enhanced capabilities. The synthetic skin can withstand temperatures up to 300 deg. The spinal augmentation includes reflex enhancement circuitry that improves reaction time by 40%. And his mind, his memories, his sense of self. Thiel makes a gesture that might be dismissive on a more human frame. Cognitive function is preserved where tactically advantageous unnecessary psychological constructs are removed or suppressed. Unnecessary constructs, I repeat slowly. You mean his identity? His identity is Imperial Guardsman. She corrects me. All else is extraneous to his function. We eliminate disrupting elements. Fear response, pain sensitivity, emotional attachment, traumatic memory. What remains is a more efficient soldier. Horror blooms in my chest like a poisonous flower. This is far beyond the neural regeneration techniques I developed. This is not healing. It is not even the straightforward conversion to Servitor status, which at least acknowledges that the human being is being transformed into something else. This is the deliberate fragmentation of a human soul under the guise of medical treatment, and the subject's consent to this procedure. I ask, already knowing the answer. Consent is implied through Imperial service. Thiel responds with the practiced ease of someone reciting doctrine. The form you signed upon joining the departmental medic included provisions for your body and skills to be utilized as deemed necessary for the Imperium's benefit. As I did, as we all do, the fine print of service that no one reads because refusing to sign means execution for dereliction of duty. I see, I managed to say, moving to examine the next subject. This one appears more conventional at first glance. A female guardswoman with no visible augmentations, sleeping peacefully on her examination table. The data readout indicates standard vital signs, though her neural activity shows unusual patterns. Subject 12 represents our most promising advancement. Thiel informs me with a note of pride in her mechanical voice. No physical enhancement was required. Her modifications are entirely neurological. I scan the medical history. Corporal Amarina Thex, 31st Elysian drop troops, captured by the enemy and subjected to prolonged torture before extraction by Imperial forces. Severe psychological trauma unresponsive to standard treatment protocols. What was done to her? I ask, noting the lack of surgical documentation in her file. Targeted memory excision and emotional recalibration, Thiel explains. The first subject to undergo the full-spectrum neural remapping protocol that your research helped develop. My research, my techniques for neural pathway reconstruction, perverted into a method for selectively erasing portions of human identity. I feel physically ill. She suffered extreme trauma. Thiel continues, oblivious to my distress. Conventional treatment would have classified her as irredeemable category Omega. Instead, we simply removed the traumatic memories and associated emotional responses. She will return to active duty without the psychological burden of her experiences, and without the growth and resilience that overcoming trauma might have provided. I observe quietly. The IEL's optical lens whirs as it focuses on me. An inefficient approach. Trauma resolution through conventional psychological treatment has a success rate of 63% and requires an average of 76 days. Our method succeeds in 97% of cases and requires only 14 days of recovery. The cold calculus of efficiency. This is the true face of Imperial medicine. Stripped of the comforting platitudes we tell ourselves in the lower floors. We do not heal. We salvage. We repurpose. We ensure that every human resource is utilized to maximum effect, regardless of the cost to the individual. What are my specific duties here? I ask, pulling myself back to professional detachment. You will refine the neural remapping protocols based on your research, Thiel explains. Meos Hikarian believes your techniques can be adapted to create more specialized modifications, targeted memory retention, selective skill enhancement, loyalty reinforcement, mind control. In other words, the ability to reshape a human consciousness to specifications determined by imperial authorities. I think of the thousands of guardsmen who pass through Field Hospital Turte each month. How many are deemed suitable for these enhancements? How many wake up as something less than themselves with portions of their humanity excised for the sake of efficiency? I will need time to review the existing protocols. I say buying time to process this revelation and to understand how my techniques have been implemented thus far. Of course, your quarters include a data terminal with access to all relevant research materials. The gestures toward the exit. You will begin active participation tomorrow at 06,000 hours. For now, familiarize yourself with the subjects and the monitoring systems. She departs, leaving me alone among the partially disassembled humans who are neither patients nor servitors, but something new and terrible. I move between the tables, reviewing data readouts and surgical records with growing dread. Each subject represents a different approach to the central question that seems to drive Project Lazarus. How much of a human can be replaced or removed while maintaining combat effectiveness? Subject 16 has had his entire limbic system bypassed, rendering him incapable of fear, love, or attachment, but preserving logical function and combat training. Subject 20 has been fitted with an experimental memory implant that can upload tactical data directly to her consciousness. Subject 23 exists primarily as a brain and partial spinal column, the rest replaced with machinery that makes him more weapon than man. They call this healing. They call this service to the Emperor. As I complete my rounds, I notice a sealed door at the far end of the laboratory. Unlike the other entrances, this one bears additional security measures and warning sigils. The designation on the door reads Phase 4 Implementation. If these horrors represent Phase 3, what could possibly lie beyond that threshold? I check the data slate Hikarian provided, scanning my new authorization codes. According to the security clearance, I have access to all areas of Level 8, except the Phase 4 chambers. Those require special authorization from the Magos himself. Turning away from the forbidden door, I locate a monitoring station and begin the process of acquainting myself with the systems that keep these unfortunate souls in their twilight state between humanity and machinery. The interface is more sophisticated than anything available in the lower floors, with detailed neural mapping displays that show real-time brain activity across multiple regions. As I study the readouts, I notice something strange. Subject 12, the guardswoman with the supposedly excised memories, shows activity patterns in her hippocampus consistent with memory retrieval during REM sleep. According to the surgical records, those portions of her brain were specifically targeted for recalibration. They should not be active. I check the other subjects with neural modifications. Similar anomalies appear in varying degrees. Subject 16, whose emotional centers were bypassed, shows subtle activity in his amygdala when monitoring systems play recorded battle sounds. Subject 20, with her tactical data implant, exhibits unusual patterns in regions associated with identity and self-awareness. The modifications are failing. Or perhaps more accurately, the human consciousness is fighting back against the imposed limitations. I sit back from the terminal, mind racing with implications. If the neural remapping is impermanent, if the human psyche naturally attempts to rebuild severed connections, then the entire Project Lazarus approach is fundamentally flawed. These subjects are not being transformed into more efficient warriors. They are being placed in a state of constant neurological conflict between their modified functions and their natural healing processes. No wonder they keep them sedated between procedures. Awakening would bring not just physical pain, but the existential horror of a consciousness at war with itself. I hear footsteps approaching and quickly switch the terminal display to a standard monitoring view. A Mechanicus servitor approaches, moving with the unnatural precision of its kind. Medici-Vale, it owns. Your presence is required in Orientation Chamber 2. Please follow. I comply, following the servitor through corridors that grow increasingly sterile and machine-like as we move deeper into Level 8. The walls here are not the repurposed marble of the former governmental building, but installations of gleaming metal and humming machinery that speak to significant Mechanicus investment. The Orientation Chamber resembles a surgical theater, but the equipment is unlike anything I have used before. At the center stands a chair fitted with restraints and surrounded by arcane machinery that pulses with energy. Neural interface probes hang from articulated arms above the chair, their tips gleaming with unholy purpose. Your orientation will commence, the servitor announces, gesturing toward the chair. Please be seated. Understanding dawns with sickening clarity. This is not an orientation in the conventional sense. This is where they ensure compliance, where they guarantee loyalty to Project Lazarus, perhaps even where they make adjustments to ensure enthusiasm for the work. Is this standard procedure for new staff? I ask, remaining at the threshold. All personnel must undergo neural compliance verification, the servitor confirms. The process ensures alignment with project objectives and security protocols. They intend to use their own techniques on me to reach into my mind and reshape it to their specifications to ensure that any moral qualms or ethical concerns are conveniently excised in the name of efficiency. I say mind racing, and Magos Hecarim oversees this process personally. The Magos monitors all compliance procedures. The servitor confirms, please be seated. Delay extends procedure duration and discomfort. So Hecarim is watching, though not physically present. This gives me a slim opportunity if I can think quickly enough. Of course, I agree, moving toward the chair with false confidence. Though I would like to clarify one technical matter before we begin. My research on neural pathway reconstruction specifically noted the importance of preparation routines to minimize rejection patterns. Has this been incorporated into the compliance verification protocol? The servitor pauses, its limited intelligence processing my question against its programmed parameters. Uncertain, it finally responds. Technical queries should be directed to authorized Mechanicus personnel. I am authorized Mechanicus personnel now, I remind it, and this relates directly to my safety during the robo procedure. I simply need to verify that the hippocampal stabilization sequence is implemented before primary neural mapping begins. Otherwise, we risk catastrophic memory cascade. I am speaking gibberish, of course, technical-sounding nonsense designed to confuse a servitor that lacks the contextual knowledge to evaluate my claims. But I maintain the confident demeanor of a specialist, discussing routine matters with a subordinate. The servitor's logic engines almost visibly strain. Procedure alteration requires authorization, not alteration. I correct smoothly, moving to the control terminal rather than the chair. Standard safety verification. See here, I gesture to the display, which shows complicated neural mapping protocols I don't remotely understand. The initialization sequence should include hippocampal stabilization. I can verify it myself if you authorize terminal access. After another moment of hesitation, the servitor makes its decision. Temporary access granted for safety verification only. The terminal activates under my fingertips, giving me access to the system. I have no idea how to operate it properly, but I don't need to. I just need time and the appearance of authority. Thank you, I murmur, fingers dancing across the controls as if I know what I'm doing. In reality, I'm desperately searching for anything that might help me escape this situation. There, among the neural compliance protocols, I find something labeled emergency termination sequence. It appears to be a safety measure designed to immediately end the procedure in case of unexpected complications. I don't know exactly what it does, but at this point, any disruption works in my favor. I need to calibrate the neural probes, I announce, moving toward the mechanical arms suspended above the chair. Standard procedure before subject insertion. The servitor watches impassively as I pretend to examine the probes, positioning myself within reach of several controls. Calibration complete, I declare after a moment. Now I will verify the initialization sequence. I return to the terminal, and with a silent prayer to the Emperor, activate the emergency termination protocol. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Alarm klaxons blare throughout the chamber. The neural interface arms retract violently into their housing. Emergency shutters slam down over the entrance and the lighting shifts to red warning indicators. Critical system failure detected, announces an automated voice over the Vox system. Neural interface containment breach possible. Emergency lockdown initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. The servitor programmed to respond to safety protocols immediately moves toward a previously hidden emergency exit that is opened in the wall. Neural compliance suspended it in tones. Follow evacuation procedures. Instead of following, I rush back to the terminal. In the confusion, I have perhaps seconds to access information before someone overrides the emergency protocol remotely. I pull up the facility map, quickly memorizing the layout of Level 8 and noting the locations of security checkpoints. Most importantly, I locate the service lifts. Unlike the main elevators, which require specific authorization for each level, the service lifts are designed for maintenance personnel and emergency evacuation. According to the schematic, they connect all levels from the subsurface maintenance areas to the roof. I also notice something strange about the facility layout. The sublet designations extend far deeper than they should for a repurposed governmental building. Level -8 is marked as primary research containment with no further details provided. 8 levels above ground, 8 levels below. The symmetry seems deliberate and unsettling. The terminal suddenly goes dark as someone remotely cuts power to the room. My time is up. I rush toward the emergency exit the servitor used, slipping through. Just before the portal seals itself shut, I find myself in a narrow maintenance corridor lit by dim red emergency lumens. Distant alarms continue to sound, and I can hear the mechanical thrum of security servitors mobilizing. I need to move quickly. According to the mental map I've constructed, the nearest service lift should be 2 intersections ahead, then left down a secondary corridor. I move as quickly as I dare, listening for sounds of pursuit. The corridor layout matches my memorized schematic, and I soon find myself facing the service lift doors. Unlike the ornate main elevators, this is a simple industrial platform designed for moving equipment and supplies. A basic control panel shows buttons for all 16 levels from 8 to 8. I hesitate. The upper levels likely offer no escape, as they would be the first place Hicarian would look for me. The lower floors of the hospital where I worked until today might provide temporary shelter among familiar faces, but eventually they would find me there. That leaves the negative levels. Unknown territory, potentially even more dangerous than what I've seen above, but also unlikely to be the first place they search for an escaping medic. I press the button for level -1, reasoning that I can reassess from there. The lift judders into motion, descending into the unknown depths beneath Field Hospital Terseus. As the lift carries me downward, I try to organize my thoughts and develop some semblance of a plan. I know too much to be allowed to escape. Project Lazarus represents a fundamental perversion of imperial medicine, even by the Imperium's brutal standards. If word of these experiments reached the wider Mechanicus or the Ecclesiarchy, questions would be asked regardless of the project's military value. My only hope lies in finding evidence concrete enough to secure protection from authorities outside Hecarin's influence, or failing that away off this Emperor-forsaken planet entirely. The lift slows to a stop, and the doors slide open to reveal level 1. The difference from the upper floors is immediately apparent. Gone are the sterile laboratory environments and sophisticated medical equipment. This level resembles a storage facility with wide corridors lined with sealed containers and equipment pallets. The lighting is utilitarian, and the air carries the scent of machine oil and preservative chemicals. I step cautiously from the lift, listening for any sound of activity. The level seems deserted, likely evacuated during the emergency alert I triggered. That gives me precious time to explore and determine my next move. Moving between towering stacks of crates, I examine markings and manifest tags, searching for anything that might explain what lies in the levels below. Most containers hold mundane supplies, medical equipment, replacement parts for servitors, bulk pharmaceuticals, nothing that would require such secrecy. Then I find something unusual. A sealed refrigeration unit bearing Mechanicus warnings and biohazard sigils. The manifest label reads Specimen Transfer Containers, Phase 4 Trial Authorized Personnel Only, Phase 4. The mysterious final stage of Project Lazarus that required special authorization beyond even what Hicarian had granted me. I examine the container, noting that it requires a specific access code to open. I don't have the code, but my Medicare authorization might grant me access to the manifest details. I scan my identification chip against the container's logistic quotator. To my surprise, the quotator accepts my credentials and displays the manifest contents. What I read turns my blood to ice. Tyrannid biomaterial. Classification, extreme hazard genetic sequences isolated from high fleet Kraken specimens, authorized by inquisitorial mandate, 775 Delta 93 Tyrannid genetic material, the most dangerous xeno-life forms known to the Imperium, capable of adapting to any environment, any weapon, any tactic, and someone is bringing their biological material into a facility where human subjects are being experimentally modified. The implications are too horrifying to contemplate. Is Project Lazarus attempting to incorporate Xenos biological adaptations into human soldiers? Such tech heresy goes beyond mere efficiency improvements or psychological conditioning. It borders on the creation of abominations that violate the very foundation of imperial doctrine. A distant sound of mechanical movement snaps me back to my immediate predicament. The security systems are being reset, which means my window of opportunity is closing. I need to move deeper, find more concrete evidence, and locate a way to escape. With that evidence intact, I return to the service lift. Considering my options, level 8, labeled as primary research containment, likely holds the answers I seek but also represents the greatest danger. The intermediate levels might provide additional context and possibly less heavily guarded evidence. A compromise. Then I press the button for level 4. Halfway to the bottom, the lift descends once more, carrying me deeper into the heart of whatever madness lurks beneath Field Hospital Terte. The doors open on level 4, and I immediately recoil at the stench that assaults my nostrils. The smell of putrefaction and chemical preservatives mingles with something alien and indescribable. The corridor before me is dimly lit, the walls lined with large observation windows that look into darkened chambers. Moving cautiously forward, I approach the nearest window. As I draw closer, red emergency lumens activate inside the chamber, revealing its contents. I stifle a gasp of horror. The room contains rows of preservation tanks, each holding what appears at first glance to be a human body. But closer inspection reveals terrible modifications, limbs elongated to impossible proportions, exoskeletons emerging from beneath stretched skin, extra joints where no joints should be, and most disturbing of all, faces frozen in expressions of agony, suggesting these modifications were performed on conscious subjects. The plaque beside the window reads, Phase 2 Failures Genetic Incompatibility Series. These are not successes being prepared for battlefield deployment. These are the failures preserved for study. The unfortunate souls whose bodies rejected whatever abominable modifications were attempted. I move to the next window. Here the tanks contain more recognizably human subjects, but each bears subtle modifications to their basic structure, enhanced musculature that ripples unnaturally beneath pale skin. Reinforced bone structures visible through translucent flesh, sensory organs modified for unknown purposes, Phase 3 Developmental Series. The plaque announces, These then are the prototypes for the enhancements I saw on level 8. Window after window reveals new horrors, an entire taxonomy of human modification, ranging from subtle neural rewiring to grotesque physical transformations that leave the subjects barely recognizable as members of our species. Some modifications appear based on mechanical principles, integrating technology with flesh in novel ways. Others seem inspired by biological systems not native to humanity. And some, the most disturbing, show characteristics I recognize from classified picked captures of tyrannid organisms. At the end of the corridor stands a heavily reinforced door, bearing multiple warning sigils and a sophisticated security system. The marking above it reads Live Specimen Containment. Whatever lies beyond that door is still alive, still active. Given what I've seen preserved in the tanks, I'm not sure I want to encounter the live versions. A sudden hiss of static from the Vox system freezes me in place. Attention all personnel, comes the mechanical voice of Magos biologist Hikarion. Security breach on level 8. One research subject unaccounted for. Medicae Karen Vale has evaded containment protocols and should be considered unstable and dangerous. If encountered, subdue but do not terminate. His neural architecture is required intact. Not escaped, not missing, unaccounted for, a research subject, not a colleague. I was never intended to serve as a medic on level 8. I was meant to be the next experimental subject. My neural architecture particularly valuable due to my research. The announcement continues. Emergency protocols suspended. Return to standard operations. Security servitors will conduct level B level search patterns. Seal all transit points between levels. The service lifts will soon be locked down. If I'm going to find evidence and escape, I need to move quickly. But where? Ascending risks encounter with security forces searching from the top down. Descending brings me closer to whatever primary research is being conducted on level 8. Before I can decide, a new sound reaches me. From behind the reinforced containment door comes a scraping, chittering noise that raises the hair on the back of my neck. Something large is moving within. Something that shouldn't exist within an Imperial facility. The decision is made for me. Whatever horrors await below, they cannot be worse than what approaches from within the containment chamber. I sprint back to the service lift, jabbing the button for level -8 with desperate force. As the doors slide closed, I catch a glimpse of the containment door at the corridor's end beginning to buckle outward, as if struck by tremendous force from within. Then the lift descends, carrying me toward the heart of Project Lazarus, where I suspect the full extent of Hecaron's tech heresy awaits. Level -8 announces itself with absolute silence. When the lift doors part, I am greeted not by alarms or security forces, but by a stillness so complete it feels almost solid. The air here is cooler, processed and filtered to a degree that removes all trace of the hospital above, or the horrors of the intermediate levels. I step cautiously into a circular antechamber, lined with data terminals and monitoring equipment. The walls curve gently, formed not of the prefabricated panels common to Imperial installations, but of some smooth, slightly iridescent material I cannot immediately identify. The effect is subtly disorienting, as if the dimensions of the space shift slightly when viewed from different angles. At the center of the chamber stands a circular platform surrounded by a ring of softly glowing runes. Beyond it, a single massive door bears the sigil of the Ordo Xenos division of the Imperial Inquisition. The presence of an inquisitorial seal confirms my worst fears. This goes beyond unauthorized experimentation or even routine tech heresy. This has sanction from the highest and most secretive authorities of the Imperium itself. I approach the nearest data terminal, wondering if my newly granted credentials will provide access. To my surprise, the screen activates at my touch, recognizing the subcutaneous identification chip all Medicaid personnel receive upon commissioning. Identity confirmed. Medicaid Karen Vale flashes across the screen. Project Lazarus Phase 4 access granted. Magos biologist Hikarion has added you to the authorized personnel roster. Welcome to Genesis Chamber. Either my escape has not yet been reported to the system, or this is an elaborate trap. Regardless, I have a brief window to learn what I can before Hikarion's forces find me. The terminal offers access to research logs, subject data, and facility schematics. I choose the research logs first, hoping to understand what Project Lazarus truly entails. The first entry is dated 3 years ago, coinciding with the initial Tyranid incursion into the Farthest system. Specimen acquisition successful. Splinter fleet remnants contained and isolated by Ordo Xenos strike force. Primary adaptation organ cluster extracted intact. Commencing analysis of Synapse creature neural structure. Subsequent entries document a progressive research program studying Tyranid biological adaptability, with particular focus on the hive mind's ability to maintain control over countless organisms through synaptic connection. 6 months later, the first references to human integration appear. Human neural compatibility tests show promise. Subject series A1 through A7 demonstrate partial acceptance of synapse tissue grafts. Rejection cascade contained through immunosuppression and warp field isolation. Consciousness retention at 43% sufficient for basic function assessment. Magos Hikarion has authorized expansion to full clinical trials. The entries grow increasingly technical, documenting a systematic program to incorporate Tyranid synaptic tissue into human neural architecture. The goal becomes clear: to create human soldiers who maintain individual cognitive function, but operate with the unified purpose and adaptability of a Tyranid hive. A perfect army. Soldiers who function as individuals but fight with the coordination of a single organism. Troops who can adapt to battlefield conditions in real time, developing resistances to enemy weapons and tactics within hours rather than generations. And at the center of it all, a controlling intelligence to replace the Tyranid hive mind. A human neural network sophisticated enough to manage the synaptic connections, but loyal to the Imperium. My neural network. My research into neural pathway reconstruction, repurposed to create a human hive mind. The final entry, dated just yesterday, chills me to the bone. Subject primary has been acquired. Neural architecture ideal for synaptic control node implementation. Procedure scheduled for 07,000 hours. Upon successful integration, Phase 4 final trials will commence. Anticipated deployment of 1st Genesis Legion within 6 months. I was never meant to direct the Bring research. I was meant to become the research, the controlling node in a network of hybrid soldiers. Before I can process the full horror of this revelation, the massive inquisitorial door begins to slide open. I duck behind a bank of equipment, watching as Magos biologist Hikarion himself emerges, accompanied by a figure in the distinctive armor of an inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos. The breach is unfortunate but manageable. Hikarion's mechanical voice assures his companion, Medicaid Vale cannot leave the facility. His neural architecture is too valuable to the project. Your security protocols have proven inadequate. The Inquisitor responds, voice distorted by helmet vox emitters. If knowledge of Project Lazarus spreads beyond this facility, even my authority will not prevent censure from the more conservative factions within the Order. The risk is minimal. Hikarion insists. Vale knows only fragments. Without access to the Genesis chamber itself, he cannot comprehend the full scope of our work. They move toward the lift I arrived in. neither noticing my concealed position. As they pass, I catch glimpses of what lies beyond the massive door, a vast, dimly lit chamber dominated by a central structure that resembles both a medical apparatus and some form of alien growth. Surrounding it, rows of humanoid figures float in suspension tanks connected to the central structure by glistening tendrils that pulse with unnatural life. When the door closes behind the departing officials, I emerge from hiding and approach the Genesis chamber entrance. The door remains partially open, prevented from sealing by some malfunction or deliberate action by the departing Inquisitor. I hesitate at the threshold, knowing that what lies beyond will likely shatter any remaining faith I have in the Imperium I have served. But knowledge is my only weapon now, my only hope of escaping with enough evidence to perhaps find protection from someone with the authority to stop this abomination. I slip through the gap into the Genesis chamber. The space beyond defies easy comprehension. What appeared from a distance to be a single chamber is in fact a vast complex extending downward in concentric rings, like an inverted amphitheater or the interior of a massive aeropod hive. Each ring holds dozens of suspension tanks containing human forms in various stages of transformation. The central structure rises from the lowest point, a twisted spire of biological and mechanical components that reaches almost to the ceiling far above. At its core, partially obscured by pulsating membranes, I glimpse something that resembles a massive brain, far larger than any human organ, but bearing the unmistakable convolutions of cerebral tissue. This is the endpoint of Project Lazarus. Not enhanced human soldiers serving the Imperium, but a new form of hybrid being, neither human nor tyrannid, controlled by a central intelligence grown from harvested neural tissue. Movement draws my attention to the nearest suspension tank. The figure within, superficially human but bearing subtle alterations to its basic structure, turns its head to track my movement. Its eyes open, revealing pupils that contract vertically like those of a reptile, or more disturbingly, a tyrannid organism. It recognizes me. Worse, it seems aware, conscious of its condition and surroundings. These are not mindless servitors or combat automatons. These are thinking beings trapped in a nightmarish transformation. The figure raises one hand to the glass separating us. Its fingers have elongated, the joints multiplied, the skin hardened into a carapace-like covering. With one sharp nail, it begins to trace letters on the inside of the glass. HELPUS, more movement catches my eye. Throughout the chamber, other subjects are stirring, turning to face me, reaching out with partially transformed limbs. Some try to speak, their mouths moving behind breathing apparatus. Others tap against the glass of their tanks, creating a growing percussion that echoes through the vast space. They were waiting. Somehow they knew someone would eventually come who was not part of the project, someone who might see them as victims rather than subjects, someone who might help. But what can I do? I am one medic against the combined authority of the Mechanicus and the Inquisition. I have no weapons, no authority, no means to free these unfortunate souls, many of whom are probably beyond saving even if I could release them. Then I notice something important about the central structure. The pulsating brain-like mass at its center is connected to each suspension tank by tendrils that carry the same synaptic fluid documented in the research logs. It is the control node for the entire system, the artificial hive mind that will eventually direct the Genesis Legion, and it remains incomplete. According to the logs, it awaits integration with my neural architecture. Without that final component, the system is vulnerable. The idea forms with terrible clarity. I can destroy it not by force which I lack, but by corruption, by introducing a fatal flaw into the synaptic network that will cascade through the entire system. My medical implants include emergency stimulants designed to maintain function during extended surgeries. One particular compound, a powerful neurotransmitter booster, would be catastrophic if introduced to the delicate balance of the synaptic fluid. It would trigger an uncontrolled cascade of neural activity, essentially causing the network to experience a massive seizure. I make my decision. Moving quickly to the central control panel, I use my medical credentials to access the system. As expected, basic monitoring functions are available even without higher authorization. I call up the network status display, confirming my theory about the central node's vulnerability. The subjects watch me, some pressing closer to the glass of their tanks, others making frantic gestures I cannot fully interpret. They sense something is about to happen, though they cannot know what. I removed the stimulant injector from my medical kit, modifying the delivery system to connect with the network's maintenance port. Once introduced to the central node, the compound will spread throughout the system via the synaptic connections. A warning klaxon suddenly blare throughout the chamber. On the status display, red warning indicators flash. Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols engaged. Containment procedures initiating. They found me, or at least detected my presence in the system. I have minutes, perhaps seconds, before security forces arrive. With desperate haste, I complete the connection between my injector and the maintenance port. I hesitate only briefly before triggering the full release of the neurotransmitter compound into the system. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The brain-like mass at the center of the structure convulses violently, the membrane surrounding it pulsating with increasing speed. The synaptic fluid in the connecting tendrils changes color, darkening from pale blue to angry purple as the compound spreads throughout the chamber. The subjects in the suspension tanks react to the contamination. Some convulse in obvious pain. Others remain eerily still, watching with those disturbing vertical pupils as their fate unfolds. The one who wrote on the glass presses its palm flat against the surface, maintaining eye contact with me. Its expression is impossible to read on its partially transformed face, but I sense something like gratitude beneath the pain. Alarms escalate in intensity as the compound reaches critical concentration in the network. The status display flashes increasingly urgent warnings. Neural network destabilizing. Synaptic cascade failure imminent. Emergency containment failing. Recommend immediate evacuation and facility sterilization. The doors at the upper levels slam open as security. Forces arrive. Skittery troops pour in, weapons raised, mechanical eyes scanning for threats. Magos Hecarim strides among them, his meschandrites writhing in obvious agitation. Vale. His voxcaster booms across the chamber. What have you done? What you should have done, I call back. Ended this abomination before it could spread beyond Varthaxis. You understand nothing? Hecker and snulls, the emotion surprising from his mechanical voice. This was humanity's salvation. The only hope against the tyrannid threat becoming what we fear is not salvation, I respond. It's surrender. The central structure begins to emit a high-pitched keening sound as the neural cascade accelerates. Tanks throughout the chamber crack as their occupants thrash with increasing violence. Synaptic fluid sprays from rupturing connections, sizzling where it contacts exposed metal. Kill him, the Inquisitor commands from the doorway. Neutralize the contamination. The project can be salvaged if we act quickly. Troops open fire, lust bolts sizzling through the air around me. I dive behind the control panel, using the minimal cover to shield myself from the initial volley. But I know I cannot escape. The damage I've done to the system is catastrophic, but not yet irreversible. If they capture me alive, they might use my neural architecture to rebuild what I've destroyed. There is only one way to ensure Project Lazarus dies here. I reach once more for my medical kit, removing the final emergency injector. This one contains a very different compound, a fast-acting toxin kept for merciful euthanasia of patients beyond saving. The subject who wrote on the glass watches me prepare the injector. It nods once, a surprisingly human gesture from its increasingly alien face. For what it's worth, I say. Though it cannot hear me through the glass. I'm sorry I cannot save you, any of you. Last fire intensifies around my position. The central structure begins to collapse under the fine strain of the neural cascade. Tanks rupture in explosive sequence around the chamber, releasing half-transformed subjects and contaminated synaptic fluid in a toxic flood. In the chaos, I press the injector to my neck and trigger the release. The toxin works quickly, designed to provide a painless end. As consciousness begins to fade, I see Hecarim charging toward me, mechanical limbs propelling him across the chamber with inhuman speed. Too late. My neural architecture will be useless to him within seconds. The last thing I see before darkness claims me is the central brain-like structure rupturing in a spray of tissue and fluid, its pulsations ceasing as the cascade reaches critical failure. Project Lazarus dies with me. In my final moment of awareness, a strange peace settles over me. I have failed in so many ways during my service to the Imperium. Failed to truly heal those under my care. Failed to resist the system of categorization that reduced humans to resources. Failed to question the horrors perpetrated in the Emperor's name. But in this one act, perhaps I have succeeded. Perhaps I have prevented an abomination that would have further eroded what humanity remains in the Imperium of man. The Emperor may not protect us from ourselves, But sometimes we can protect humanity from those who claim to serve its interests. As consciousness slips away, I wonder if there will be anything of Karen Vale left to stand before the Golden Throne and be judged. Or if, like so many under my care, I will simply cease, categorized and processed, another resource expended in the eternal grinding war. The darkness takes me, and with it comes not fear, but a final defiant assertion of the humanity project Lazarus sought to transcend. I choose this end not for the Emperor, not for the Imperium, but for the sake of remaining human in a galaxy that has forgotten what that means.